everyone. Welcome to our very first ever Sequel Pitch Spoilercast, or as it's kind of as we're presenting it with the two SP capital letters, a spoilercast. And so maybe there'll be a better way to stylize that without making it look like the word is being sick. But you know, it's synergy, it's brand synergy, so we're going for it. My name's Drew Toynbee. I've seen No Time to Die. With me is Ross Harmston.
Hello, I'm Ross, and I've seen No Time to Die.
Yeah. And also, we have welcoming back very special first ever Sequel Pitch guest, Jordan King.
Yay.
Hello, I am Jordan King, and I have seen No Time to Die twice.
Yes, he has. Jordan is... Ross and I are breathing rarefied air in the presence of someone who went to the very real IMAXy press screening of No Time to Die on Tuesday in London. Jordan,
Certainly.
How was that?
It was, I mean, the experience once you're sat in the cinema and you know you're watching the film after 2 years, incredible. The lead up to that, all kinds of stress. Long story involving PR invites, and then no, you're not going, and then yes, you are going, and then arriving at the front of the queue at the venue to be told you're not on their list and we'll go and find you a seat, and then getting to be in your seat, and then being told once you're in your seat, two other people have been given the same seat as you. By which point you just sort of stare at the floor and say, I'm not going anywhere now. I'm just here to watch the film and you can't make me leave.
So this is like, we don't have sections planned for this. This is just a big chat about the movie. And so I've written down a few talking points that I might or might not hit, but what do you guys want to talk about? Is there anything that jumps out in particular for you to discuss?
So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things to talk about with this film. Some very, very big spoilery things that we will get to in due course. But I would say that maybe a good place to start would be at the very start with probably one of the most unique cold opens in Bond history. I really love it. And I find it's almost like a horror film, which really took me off guard when I first saw it, and the second time as well.
Yeah. And the moment Safin appears at the window is a really good jump scare. But it's also like it's a cold open within a cold open, because I almost, when it gets to the end of her sort of flashback and then we go to Madeline in the water remembering it, and I was like, oh, are they gonna do a Christopher Nolan and have the title sequence at the very end of the film? Because it felt like we'd had the pre-credits scene and it was that little sequence, and then the film just got going, but it worked so well.
Yeah. What did you?
Yeah, definitely a different approach than they ever have done. Also, a bit of backstory to the baddie that they set up in this one as well. Like,
who is not Dr. No, by the way.
No, I was so desperate for that reveal and it never came.
Yeah. Who is he? No one knows. What was he doing there? No one knows. But it was good. Like, it had elements of like a little bit of Hannah. Have you ever seen that film? Like, it felt like that kind of thing. And
obviously a really good callback to the Conversation Inspector, where she reveals she knows how to use a pistol to Bond when they're on the train because he's trying to teach her, and she's like, oh, a man came to the house and I stopped him.
Yeah.
But also thinking back to this, because I walked out of the cinema overall with this film, just loved it, really loved it, but I was a bit disappointed about the villain. But thinking back to this, the cold open, he's Madeline's villain. He's not Bond's villain, or he's Bond's family's villain. And yes, he is still tied to Blofeld in some way, but it's I think part of why it didn't sit right with me was because I was waiting to find out why he's connected to Bond, but he's not. He's connected to Bond's sort of wife, common law wife.
Yeah. I think something as well, like, I mean, I completely agree in terms of I was somewhat underwhelmed overall by both Rami Malek's performance, which was it was a very earnest and committed creepy Bond villain performance. I don't think you can doubt that he was trying to sit alongside your sort of historic Blofelds or Scaramanga. He was definitely aiming for that ballpark. But I think that there was something very generic about his villain presentation, like the non-specific Eastern European accent and the sort of wishy-washy plot to take over the world that kind of hinges on I love Madeline and also people want to be ruled over, which was a slightly odd. But the beginning, though, when you're first introduced to him in The Mask, it was such a. What I liked is that when you go through the gun barrel and you go into, that overhead shot and it's just slowly tracking towards the house and you see the figure there and then you see Madeline with her mother. I like the fact that it basically plays out in real time, that whole encounter, and that he's approaching. You see them sort of having a reasonably normal conversation. I mean, normal as it can be when you're talking about her father and it's like, do you love murderers, which is very foreshadowing. But like you've got this like innate sense of trepidation about like what's going to happen when he gets to the house. Like once he gets to the house, everything is drawn out and protracted. And I think this is actually overall leading up to when the song No Time to Die comes in. I think it's the longest pre-credit sequence in any Bond film.
It has to be.
I think because I was sort of not subconsciously, but I was checking the watch a bit to see on a second watch. I think it's about 24 minutes all in all.
Well, yeah, because you've got the entirety of the Italy scene where he goes to Vesper's grave, then he has the car chase scene, then he gets them on the train. That's when the old style of the like circles come up, like the Dr. No.
I mean, it's like you get two cold opens for the price of one, essentially.
Yeah.
And I really, really love the transition from Madeline's memory to her in Italy with James, and then like the way that's immediately looped into like this is what this story is going to thematize throughout, that like the idea of the past on a collision course with the present. And like when Bond says to her, where did you go to earlier? And there's all of this talk, the guy taking them up to the hotel saying like, oh, what are these people doing with the fire? Oh, they're burning secrets. And it's like, it's almost like a pun, like burning secrets. But you get that thing straight away of like Bond and Madeline are both on a collision course with the past in the present, and how's that gonna either prevent or lead them to whatever lies in the future. And I thought that was really slickly done in that as a very first opening gambit for the film to come. At that point I was there like, okay, I'm in with this now, and this isn't going to be Spectre again.
And it was nice to see like an actual car chase, like with some gadgets and
being used.
Yeah, that was really good. And
some sheep.
Yeah.
And some sheep.
Release the sheep or I'm going to fucking kill you.
I'll kill you. Release the sheep or I'll kill you.
Just some little farmer boy just like, oh, okay.
How do you get this number? Oh, okay.
And I love the scene where they're just in that courtyard in the Aston Martin and it's getting pelted by bullets. And he's just looking at the steering wheel. And, the journey that Bond's gone on, I really enjoyed, because he got betrayed by Vesper, who he loved, and he doesn't trust. Like, he's gone through this whole, like, the rest of the films not really being able to trust anyone, not being able to let anyone in, and then he finally let her in a little bit, and he immediately thought she betrayed him, and I like that moment of him just literally looking at her and then going, okay, fine, let's go. I really love that scene. That scene was really good.
Yeah.
It felt very like it was very visceral, like the gunshots against.
Yeah.
Like you could see the tension in the wind that like at what point's it going to break. But also at the same time, again, it was like this thing of one thing I was obsessed with was how well the film managed to like you've got incredible like wide shots of vistas of all of these brilliant exotic locales, like you've got Italy and Cuba and Jamaica and Norway, and gorgeous cinematography.
Yeah.
But also like the film did such an amazing job at taking you into Bond's headspace. And I just felt like that scene in the car, gunfire raining down, you can see the rage bubbling inside him. And he doesn't quite know how he's going to let that come out. You can kind of see him deciding what to do in the moment. And I think like that moment where Madeline is like pleading with him, and it's kind of like a moment where he probably realizes, okay, right, these people are going to kill her as well as me. I'll do something, and then this is it for us. And then you see the machine guns come out of the hubcaps, and it's such a, like when I went to the IMAX screening of it, like you could feel the ground moving under your feet. Like it was a really punchy cinematic action movie moment, but it was like shot through with character, which I think is where Spectre maybe lost me a little bit more, was that some of the action in Spectre felt a bit detached. Whereas like in Casino Royale and Skyfall, and to an extent even Quantum of Solace, there was a lot greater sense of the man in the middle of the action. And I think this film brings that back really well. And then obviously you get to the end of that whole car chase and bike chase, which also has got one of my favorite, like, just little mini Bond moments when he clotheslines the bionic eye bad guy. He just clotheslines him off the bike. And I was just
a real public schoolboy rugby tackle, that.
But it reminds me as well of like when you are first introduced to Craig's Bond outside of the bathroom fight at the beginning of Casino Royale, like that parkour chase was so like, he's not a parkour specialist. Like he is ultimately like you say, public schoolboy kind of fight. Like that bit where he runs through the wall when he's in the chasing.
It's just the brute strength, isn't it?
The same energy of that was him like cutting him off at the pass and just throwing his body at him. And it's like, right, that'll stop you. And then when he has that like glance over at the bike and gets on it, I was just there like, yeah, that's a cool Bond moment.
Yeah. And the fucking awesome stunt scene where he jumps off of the bridge with the rope.
Wire. And the excellent bike ramp jump sort of up a wall, and that huge arc into the square with the people walking through. Just it's such a great, such a kinetic action scene, and just so I can't think of enough words to express how much I enjoyed all of that.
Okay, you're back, I think.
Yeah, I just got it back. Why does this never happen at work? Why is it that when I've got work calls, everything's fine, but as soon as I'm trying to do something actually fun,
that's hot though.
So there was something else that I wanted to say about when Bond's in the car and the windows being shot in and Madeline's sort of pleading with him. So because I read it as he believed her, that she hadn't betrayed him, but because that trust had been gone even for 5 minutes, even though he believed her, he knew that he couldn't get it back. And but did you guys take it different? Did you? So Jordan, you sort of said he realized that she was going to die, and so you saw it as him wanting to protect her, even though he didn't believe.
It wasn't so much that I didn't think that he ultimately believed her. I think that it was just that in that moment in the car, he's kind of there, and he doesn't have time to process what's just happened, the anger that he's been filled with. It's almost like it surprises him in some ways. And so in that moment, he's looking at her, he's realizing that if I don't do something now, she's going to die. And I think that like he could be on that borderline between, I believe her because look at that pleading look in her eyes, and also it's just the fact that he loves her as well. Like, he loves her, and so no matter what she had done, I don't think he would have let her come to harm, because I just don't think that he could do that, especially after what happened with Vesper. He couldn't let someone that he loved die again, even if they'd betrayed him, because obviously the note that he leaves at Vesper's grave to burn says, "Forgive me."
Yeah.
Which, you know, recenters the fact that he still feels guilty himself for letting the first woman that he loved die.
Yeah.
In that situation.
Oh, so thinking about women that he, thinking about Vesper, Jordan, you've gone back and done a rewatch of the whole franchise up to now.
I have.
And for me, serializing Daniel Craig's 5 movies has been exactly the right move. And whether or not it was quite the intention, or whether it feels disjointed because they obviously didn't have the rights to call Quantum Spectre, and then they got the rights, and so then they were like, oh, okay, well, we've got to have Spectre, and so let's have Spectre be the even bigger baddies. Whatever made it feel disjointed. In the context, but I haven't watched all of the other Bond films for a long time.
Yeah.
In that context of the 20 movies leading up to these 5, or the 20.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's 25.
Do you think that it was the right move for the franchise, or do you think it risks alienating people?
I think that, see, it's difficult for me to talk about because I have never been the most like ardent admirer of classic era James Bond films. I never connected with them on much of a level as a kid, even though ITV had them on some sort of a marathon every week as a child. But I never really found an in to like connect to that character. And I think I was spoiled a little bit by also growing up at a time where the Bourne films were starting to be made, and Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise was, you know, that was serializing the Ethan Hunt story.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like for me, revisiting the Bond films now, there's high points in that classic era of like one-off adventures, like Live and Let Die, for example. I really enjoy, and as much as it's very much maligned, I think the stupidity of Moonraker just felt like such a relief to watch a Bond where I didn't spend a lot of it going, oh God, am I going to watch a 58-year-old man stick his tongue down someone's throat again? Please, no, please. Like, it felt amazing to me to approach that point, which I think started, to be honest with you, there was a hint with George Lazenby's On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which obviously this film owes a hell of a lot to, not least in the all the time in the world motif. But that film started this idea of like, what if Bond, but human? Like, what if Bond isn't just this icon, this like sort of totem to suavity? Like, what if he also can feel pain and hurt and loss? And you got that more with Timothy Dalton, who he only got to have two outings, obviously, with License to Kill and The Living Daylights. But they felt like such radically different Bond films, even for the, you know, mid to late 80s. And then I think like with Pierce Brosnan, GoldenEye is top 3 Bond for me. I think GoldenEye is an absolutely brilliantly poised balance between some of the campier sensibilities of earlier Bond and also an attempt to try and tell something that's a little bit more in keeping with modern blockbusters, you know, offering some emotionality and offering a hero that can have weakness. But I think what happened by the time you got to Die Another Day, which I think by most people's standards is the worst James Bond film, and if not the worst, it's certainly down there in the bottom tier. I mean, there are things that are sort of like passively fun if you don't think about it. Like an invisible car as an idea is maybe quite funny. Madonna singing a Bond song, also quite funny considering she did a much better Bond song for Austin Powers. But by the time you got to Daniel Craig, and for me having marathoned at that point 19 James Bond films, and kind of going, okay, there's a lot of repetition here. There's a lot of, towards the end of Sean Connery's era, you can see that he's even starting to get tired of these one-off adventures that don't really go anywhere that often. And you can tell that towards the Roger Moore's sort of the end of his time as Bond, you can sort of feel a lethargy coming into the films, because it's like, where are these all leading to? Like, these are fun on their own, but like, I think now we're in a time where people want a continuing narrative. They want to spend time with this character. If I'm going to have 5 films with one James Bond, I want to feel like he's that one person and he's growing in some way or being challenged in a way that I'm going to go on that journey with him.
Yeah.
Over the course of Craig's 5 Bond films, even if there are blips, like Quantum of Solace famously blighted by the writer's strike and a potential actor's strike, Spectre, it's more spectacle over the emotional heft of something like Skyfall, which for a lot of people, and myself until I watched No Time to Die, I thought that would have made a great end point probably for Craig's Bond, even though it would have only been at 3 films.
Yeah.
Because that felt like such almost like I don't want to bring up the Last Jedi on an unrelated podcast in case it gets people baying for my blood, but it almost felt like the Last Jedi level deconstruction of self-myth and narrative.
Yeah.
And, it picked apart Bond as a character and his roots in a really perceptive way. And obviously the death of M was like such a huge thing for the series and the franchise to do. But I think that, to answer your question at long last, I think that by the time we get to Craig's Bond films, it's exactly what the series needed for it to be able to endure in the way that it now promises to. Because it's not always going to be enough to just look back on the old Bond films with nostalgia and go, oh, well, I like Scaramanga with his golden gun, or, I like all of those different madcap villains layers and, quite two-dimensional Bond girl characterizations and tasteless quips. Like, at some point along the line, you need to be able to look back and actually go, okay, I got something that's going to stick with me now. And I think Daniel Craig was so adamant that he wanted that to be his legacy if he was to take on that role. He wanted to be able to say, by the time I've done this, people are going to remember that story that we told over those 5 films. And because of how well I think No Time to Die manages to tie together some of the messy knots that have been threaded over the course of these films, you'll look back at those 5 and you'll never go, oh, I'll just watch Casino Royale, I'm not going to bother with the others, or I'll just stick on Skyfall. You'll go, oh, actually, I want to watch all 5 of those films because I want to see that progression from here to there.
I can't think of another film. It maybe has happened with seasons of TV shows, but I can't think of another film that has capped off a series and retroactively kind of improved the ones that came before.
Absolutely.
And there was very little room. Maybe improved is the wrong word, but certainly added more depth. And as we're talking about capping off Craig's run, let's get into the big spoilers. It is a definitive end for his character being blown up by, I think, the HMS Dragon.
Yeah.
Being blown up by a load of ginormous, what look like Iron Man Jericho missiles. And he's dead. He is properly dead. And I felt like it was so unexpected. And Jordan, we've had some conversations over Facebook about when we suspected he was doomed to die in the context of the film, which we could discuss in a second. But do you guys, was it the right choice? Was it the right move? Or do you feel like he should have been able to ride off into the sunset?
Absolutely. I think they needed to do what they did, because everyone was assuming that he was going to ride off into the sunset. And the thing about the character is that why is my thing going so mental? The thing about the character is, especially with James Bond, everyone assumes that he's got the plot armor to survive and carry on to the next one. So what better way for them to subvert that? Because they've already done that with creating a story for this one. Like, they've not done this before. They've never linked any of the other ones together in terms of a story. Yes, they've had the same character in terms of Blofeld and stuff, but played by different actors. But like, they've never linked any of them together. So what better way now again to subvert the fact that people are like, oh yeah, he's going to survive because it's James Bond, you know, he's James Bond. It's James Bond. He's going to survive. What better way than Sony Pictures and MGM to subvert that than killing him off? Like, and it was such a poignant thing, you know, like, you know, he wants that life. He wants that life with Madeline. He wants that happy ending. And the fact that he couldn't get it is shit, but it's a good, I don't know, it was a perfect end for me. What did you think, Jordan?
I mean, when I went to see the film for the first time for the press screening, I wondered coming out whether it was just the occasion surrounding it or the fact that I hadn't slept much in the last few days. But like, I cried a lot in the last 20 odd minutes of that film. And I wondered at the time whether it was, like I say, just the moment sort of getting to me. But then I went to watch the film again, and you see so many more little things that make you go, okay, he's not gonna survive this. And I was tearing up earlier even this time, because right from the very beginning, I mean, the All the Time in the World cue coming in as soon as it does, you kind of you know that, okay, historically speaking, if you know any James Bond, that brings with it bad news. So you know that something tragic's got to happen here. But then also I was thinking as well when I was watching the opening credits, like the animation sequence, which is sort of like typically out there and weird for a Bond anyway. But there's things like the DNA helix made out of guns, and like this idea of Bond being so inextricably linked to violence.
Yeah.
You know, it's literally in his DNA. And so the idea that at the end of it all, he has to die because else that weapon part of who he is will always be there. And as long as that weapon side of who he is there, the people that he loves won't be safe. I think that made the fact that his ultimate comeuppance, as it were, is being poisoned with the knowledge that if he ever touches someone again, they'll die. I mean, like, that's such a literalization of the biggest flaw in Bond's character, and also the most human aspect of him as a person who kills for his queen and country, is that he can't be around people without them being in harm's way. There's moments in the film where, you know, he's bundling Matilda into the car, and, you know, he's got his hand on his gun, he's got a hand holding her, and it's like, there you have it, there's the tension right there. His past is tied to the gun, his future's tied to this child, and at the end of the day, to be able to give her the best shot, he has to succumb. And there's so many little things that made me watching again go, okay, he, like, this is the point where people are going to realize that he's not making it out. When he gives her the jumper and says that it's cold, I just thought, like, one, it's so beautiful that, like, nothing's made of it. Like, in that final scene with the car back in Italy, you don't see her, like, with it draped over her or anything. But the idea of, like, a father giving their child something to remember them by, like, that just made me kind of go, like, oh, man, like, James Bond, like, he is being all the dad that she's going to need to remember growing up. Like, she's going to know that he gave her that jumper, like when he picks up the bunny as well, and like and as Drew was saying on Facebook, like, once he's down to his white linen shirt and you're there, like, it starts with the blood and everything, you know that, like, he's just marching slowly towards the end. And that final ascent, that, like, 3-minute illusion of a one shot as he goes up the stairs, taking on, basically doing a greatest hits of Bond, like, with the coolness and the brutality and the efficiency.
Yeah.
And even managing in amidst the, like, just before this storm's about to rain down on us, like, you even get, like, probably one of my favorite stupid quips where he uses the EMP watch and he's there like, oh, I really blew his mind. And it's like, you can tell Daniel Craig was just chewing that up. Like, he really loved it.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know, that whole, like, upwards rise towards that rooftop, it's interrupted by Safine. And I love the fact as well that when he has to kill Safine, you can tell that at this point he knows where everything's ending. He doesn't even care about killing the killer anymore or the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like,
he literally doesn't even look at him.
Doesn't even look at him. He just shoots 3 times, and it's just onwards and upwards towards the end.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something so heroic, but to steal how Roger Ebert described Spider-Man at one point, which I've always loved, heroically human is what sets Bond apart. Because when all those missiles are eventually raining down on him, he's going to get blown to smithereens, and then it cuts to Q, and you see the blood, like the heart rate monitor has gone to zeros. You're there like, he's just flesh and bone, and he's gone now. And so that idea of Q and M and everyone being in the office clinking the
Scotch glass on the table.
The Scotch glass, yeah, exactly. And then the idea at the end of it all that Madeline turns the love of her life into a story to tell her child. His name was Bond, James Bond. Like, even just talking about it is making me sort of get the goosebumps and get the emotions going.
Coupled with Hans Zimmer's, like, music as well at the end.
I was going to say, Ross is a. I thought I was quite a big film score aficionado, and Ross is way above me. And Ross, you've been spending some time today listening to the soundtrack. How is it for you in isolation?
With the soundtrack, for me, like, I can always picture what's happening on in my mind in that film, and that end score with the Hans Zimmer, and it's got the Hans Zimmer-esque stuff to it. It's got a little bit of Inception in it right at the end, and like, I like that Hans Zimmer also, lent on a lot of on Her Majesty's Secret Service music, like when he's talking to Ray Fiennes by the side of the Thames, and it's got the and exactly, and I love that, and We Have All the Time in the World when he's driving through Italy and stuff. The score is just brilliant, and that moment made me well up as well, like when he's just ascending up and he's, like, talking to Q, and Q's realizing that he's dead or he's not coming back, and just when he says, like, I'm not gonna make it back. I'm not gonna make it back. Like, that was just
Do you know what as well though that got me was that when the moment that Lashana Lynch says, can we redesignate Bond as 007? Like, that was
Yeah.
another thing for me where I was there, like, they're giving him back everything so that this, like, Herculean or Heraclean in this context image of a hero, like, they let him be that man for this, like, one last shining moment before he performs the ultimate sacrifice. But I listened to I obviously heard the score again today, getting to watch the film again, but I then on my way home decided to just listen to it because it obviously came out today. I decided to just listen to, and the actual piece that plays as he goes up the stairs and he's got Q on the earpiece is called The Final Ascent. And it's such a, sometimes I think that there's an accusation that Hans Zimmer goes so big sonically with his scores that sometimes it just gives you goosebumps because it's so loud and so, like, all encompassing. But I think what he gets down to here is, it reminded me in a lot of ways of Interstellar and something like Time from Interstellar.
Yeah.
Where everything's building and it's like the orchestra, it's almost like the orchestra becomes another character in the film. Like, it's something inside Bond's spirit that's pushing him on towards this final moment. But it's just such a beautiful, like, harmonization of the photography and the sunlight waning, and everything just feels like the perfect farewell. So by the time it comes, I think that so much care and love has been put into trying to preserve Bond's heroic legacy that I think I was ready to